was a pleasure for me to make it around this week to all the buildings for the afterboards and just give an update and see and connect with our staff, going over some of these facility updates and where we are in the planning. I just want to remind everyone back in December when the board made that final approval about the junior high, I was able to make it around to the afterboards. And then again this week, after the board had approved the junior high going on the high school site. And so I think this is just really perfect timing for Josh and your team to be able to go into the process a little bit deeper and be available for questions. So thank you for being here. And just to our staff, just a reminder, Steed Heyman and Paul, SHP, we've been using Steed Heyman and Paul for as long as I've been here, but Josh just informed me that they've been partnering with the district for 20 years. Since the high school in Plain City Elementary was built, the district has been partnering with this company. So I think that just demonstrates the loyalty and the work. Josh has been with us for just over 6 years, and I've just here recently met Kevin and Nona over the last couple years, but everyone's just been really dedicated to the district and helping us with our future plans. I also wanted to emphasize that, these engineers and architects hired by the board, they're not coming in and we're having closed doors meetings and they're telling us what they think the district should look like in the next few years. They're asking the questions. We're having all the stakeholders, students, families, and parents provide input. And then Josh points the steering committee in the direction. If you want the vision and you want the district to look like this in the next 5, 10, 15, 25 years, this is the recommendation that you should take to get that way. So I wanted to thank you again, Josh, for your expertise. So if you would like to begin, Josh Predovich, Kevin Blank, Noah Nicolette, I believe, are online. I'll pass the baton to Josh.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. And thanks everyone for jumping in. We have a summary presentation that we're going to give today. And as I mentioned before, as you're going through here, if I don't hit a point that you would like to make sure that we get into a little bit more detail on, feel free to put that into the chat. We have a few folks who are still kind of coming in. So folks, if anyone that's new to the presentation, we are in the process of recording. We're going to give a presentation here that's going to last roughly about 15 or 20 minutes. It's a series of slides, some of which you guys have seen if you've been through any of our presentations prior, and just really sort of summarizing the process. But again, my name is Josh Predovich. I am the Director of Master Planning for SHP, and I've been working with your district, as Jim mentioned. I'm probably going on, I think, 5 or 6 years at this point. And SHP, as an architecture firm, has been working with you guys since Plain City and Canaan and Monroe. All those projects were projects that we had a chance to work with you on. But again, what I'm going to do today, we're going to talk about this master planning summary. And this slide deck, as all of our slide decks, are located on the website, and we'll show you the website at the very end of the presentation. What I'd like to do is I want to talk with this group a little bit about why Jonathan Alder chose to go into master planning now, as opposed to a couple of years ago or a couple of years into the future. And we think that we're at this sort of crux of things coming together, of a number of different drivers, basically, that the district is sort of experiencing. And I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that lives in or works in the district that enrollment has been increasing, and we've been tracking that. We'll talk a little bit about what those drivers look like. We've also obviously seen that educational delivery, and I think all of the staff that's on here today, I know that you guys have been through professional development that's really changed in the last few years as the new administration has come in to talk about what the next 5 years and even 10 years of educational delivery could potentially look like. And then also in conjunction with all of that, facility improvement costs are not going down, they're increasing, right? As we have these buildings that are getting of that age, that they're getting on that 15 to 20 year lifespan, where now roofs need to be replaced and mechanical equipment needs to be considered. And so facility and costs are continuing to increase, and we've been trying to recognize that as we go through this process. As far as the district is concerned, you guys have been partnered with not only the Village of Plain City, but also with the Ohio Facility Construction Committee. And so those two partners, obviously with the village, you've been staying abreast of what's happening from a development standpoint, and paying attention to what's happening as far as new developments, new housing that's coming online, and what that impact is going to be to the district over the coming years. And with the Facility Construction Committee, they help the district put together enrollment projections. And so the two of those entities, we needed that group to come together to be able to help us with the best information possible so that we could plan. As far as what SHP's role has been in this is to help facilitate this planning process. And so we've worked with you to assess your existing facilities, to lead an educational visioning process. And that process, we'll talk about a little bit about the outcomes of that process, but that was really meant to help us understand where you're going to be from a delivery standpoint, and for us to help understand how the facilities can respond to that. We've got multiple enrollment projections that we've been evaluating throughout this process, and I'll show you some of those. And then the last piece, and the most important piece in our mind, is about the convening of that community advisory team. And that's where we tested a lot of different master plan options in order to make a recommendation to the board. And that recommendation really came from your community advisory team. And so as far as the commission is concerned, you guys have been working with them since 2003. The important piece to understand what the commission is that they help fund school district construction, school construction. And so you worked with them at Plain City Elementary, at the high school, at Canaan, and at Monroe. They've been a partner with you, and when you started working with them in the early 2000s, you locked in state and local share. And so that local share, your state share is at 54%, your local share is at 46%. So every $1 co-funded dollar is spent on a project, the state is going to reimburse you or give you 54 cents of that dollar. As you worked with them, you worked in a program called effectively locking you in as a segmented district. And all that means really is that you didn't do your whole master plan at one time. You did it in segments. And so segment one, was the high school, Plain City Elementary, and then Monroe and Canaan. And then segment two, obviously, the only remaining building that hasn't been touched through the co-funded process is the junior high. And so that is the expectation of what you will work on with the commission. And so right now, we're in between offers of funding. And so the program that's available to you is called the Expedited Local Partnership Program. And then what that means is that at this point in time, you guys put up 100% of the project cost, and then you bank credit at that 54-46 split, so that when the state comes back to you, you will have a bank of credit. And I can show you sort of what we anticipate that impact to be when they do come back with their offer of funding, which we anticipate is at least more than 2 years away. Otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed you to enter into this program. We talked about the driver of enrollment. You can look at this slide and understand that we've been tracking enrollment, and it goes back even further than 2020, that we've been sort of paying attention to what's happening. And ultimately, these enrollment projections are taking into account a lot of information. There's all the information we've received from the village about potential development. And then it's also the enrollment projection specialists, all of the three companies that are listed here that are looking at the state of Ohio and trying to understand what the future looks like for your county and for the region, and trying to factor that in, and then to appreciate what's happening in Central Ohio. And so you see cooperative strategies listed here, Future Think and Wolpert. All three of those specialists have run projections at different times, and you see that the projections have continued to increase. And so where we started in working with the district and with the community advisory team was to think about not only looking at this projection, this next 10 years of enrollment, but also thinking past that to say, what can we do now that will prepare us for growth, so that we don't have to be one of those districts that is constantly coming back to our communities for assistance because we didn't plan further than 10 years out. And so that was one of the challenges that we developed early on when thinking about enrollment. Next up, I talked about a little bit about the educational visioning. We ran an educational visioning process with you in the spring of this year that culminated in the fall. And these are the four big ideas that came out of the educational visioning. And I encourage you to get on the website and go through the presentations and look at the specifics of exactly what these 4 big ideas really meant in regards to not only delivery, but also sort of the facility response, if you will. But what this told us was that as part of the master planning was that, we're not a district that is interested in just, whatever the newest or the latest fad is in education. What we're trying to do is we're trying to appreciate what we think our impact could potentially be in the coming years. And our goal in the master planning is to try and take a look at each of these big ideas and think about what their impacts are as we think about the layouts of buildings and the facility arrangements and the types of spaces. And so this helped us understand better how to sort of right-size the budget for your projects and make sure that we can support the delivery that we anticipate maybe coming down the road for you as a district. And then the last piece, this master planning drivers of improvement costs. We took a look at the next 10 years of facility improvements and understanding that, all of those projects that were undertaken with the OFCC of the high school and the middle school, Canaan Middle School in Monroe and Plain City, all of those projects are now getting to that 15 to 20 year window, which means that it's time for roof replacements, it's time for HVAC improvements costs. And what's important here is we identified over almost $28 million worth of potential improvement costs of these major categories. What's important to understand is that the district, as a good steward of the taxpayers' money, has to prepare for these improvements. And so, as your treasurer and the team are thinking about the next 10 years, they need to make sure that money's in place to make sure that the facilities can continue to be maintained to the quality of what's expected from your community. And so what this means is that the district can't just go out and write a check for a new building. The district has to think a little bit more thoughtfully about what these improvement cost impacts are on the general fund. So it was important that we appreciated these as we move forward. So those were the drivers. As we went through the master planning process, and again, this process started probably early in 2023 as we started to pull information together, and we pulled that information into 2024. We sort of started to think about sort of 3 major themes. Number one, started with education, right? How do we take the stuff that we learned in the educational visioning and the things that you're doing from a professional development standpoint, and how do we make sure that when we're thinking about facilities that we budget for facilities that are going to provide you the flexibility to be able to not only deliver what we understand education will look like today, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And then next up, can we develop a plan that solves not only the next 10 years of projected enrollment, but maybe 15 years into the future or 20 years into the future for capacity? So again, we're not one of those districts like some of your neighbors, right, which we all know, who have come back to their communities multiple times because their enrollment continues to grow and maybe they haven't been able to sort of keep up, if you will. And then the last thing is, can we find a solution again that'll lengthen the time before we have to return to the community for another issue? So we started to think about these 3 ideas and allowed those ideas to help inform us as we move forward in the process. So I mentioned the community advisory team. That team was made up of administrators and board members and community members and just a number of different folks. And at different times, we were probably maybe 30 or 40 up to maybe 60 plus, really talking through a lot of different master plan options. I think at any point in time, we had probably 5 or 6 really strong master plan options, and we may have had as many as 10 or 12 that we at least considered. And this ultimately was the final recommendation. And so this is sort of spelling out each of the improvements, and I'm going to show you graphically and from a site standpoint what we think these impacts are. But the first thing that we talked about in trying to garner capacity, we started with the elementaries and talking about how we could potentially build a capacity in the elementaries. And so when we looked at Plain City and Monroe Elementary, the first thing that we considered was the possibility of pulling 4th grade out of those buildings in order to allow K-3 to expand in those facilities in the coming years. And so that was sort of piece number 1. And then piece number 2, looking at Canaan and thinking about Canaan. So if we pull 4th grade up, then Canaan slides down to a 4-5 middle school building. And in order to build capacity at Canaan, we identified the need to construct a 4 classroom addition. And so we'll show you graphically sort of what that looks like. Then as we move up the grade levels, this idea of building a new 6-8 junior high building, and thinking about that building really being in addition to the high school. And I'll show you what we anticipate are sort of the impacts of doing that, and some of the positives that we sort of see in that, and also some of the challenges. And then as part of that, there is also a need to improve capacity at the junior high, excuse me, at the high school itself, as we think about that potential junior high addition. And so we identified the need for an additional 8 classrooms at the high school as well. Some of the other ancillary pieces that we've been sort of tracking, number one is looking at the existing junior high building. So once the 7 and 8 move out of there and the 6th grade moves up out of Canaan, we're looking at the junior high building for the potential of preschool expansion. And so if you think about that, what that allows us to do is to pull a couple of classrooms out of Plain City Elementary and Monroe Elementary, and again, improving their capacity and bringing preschool together under one roof. And then the second piece to that, the second component, is moving district office out of the high school and bringing them to the junior high. The district office currently currently uses about 3 classrooms in the high school. And so if we're able to pull the district office out to the junior high, then we've increased capacity at the high school, we've increased capacity at the elementaries. And then the last piece, what we want to also consider here is looking at sort of specific renovations at Plain City Elementary and at Monroe Elementary and at Canaan, to think about how we can improve educational delivery and flexibility. And our initial thoughts about that are probably taking over a couple of classrooms, or potentially maybe 3 classrooms, that we then can convert to some extended learning areas and some flexible space for small group pullout. What we're recognizing, and this is not unique to Jonathan Alder, there are a number of districts that appreciate this, is that we have the need for small group space, and it needs to not take place under a stairwell or in a what is a teacher workroom or some of those other functions that need to continue. We need the dedicated space to allow that to happen, so that it doesn't happen in a 900 square foot classroom when we're working with 1-to-1 or 1-to-4 students. And so we want to go back into the existing buildings and be able to provide some of that that flexible type space that will improve educational delivery in the future. So graphically, as we look at this, across the top, you've got your grade levels. And then if you look at your facilities and look at the potential new construction, your existing facilities are in blue. The new construction and additions would be in red. And so as you look, what we're considering is at Monroe and at Plain City, again, those buildings being K3. And you can see the capacity numbers there. And so the number in green is a projected number, and the number in white is a capacity number. So at Monroe, 288 students are projected with a capacity of 360 students. And so that gives us that 80% capacity buffer, if you will, that doesn't just take on the next 10 years of enrollment. It builds 20% capacity for out past that 10-year projection, which is what was so key in our community advisory team process. So Monroe and Plain City, again, building enough capacity there for 80% of another 20% of growth. At Canaan, you can see 401 projected versus 404 capacity. That was why we felt the need to consider an addition at Canaan. And so we're looking at a 4-classroom addition that would then build in that capacity that we need. And if you look at the 6-8, we're talking about that new 6-8 junior high addition to the high school. And again, building that so that there's capacity for it to have potential growth in the future. And then at the high school, the need for another 8 classrooms to get us to that, again, 20% of growth, allowing for 20% of growth in the future. And so our goal, again, with all of this is to think not just 10 years into the future, but beyond. And we believe that this plan that your community advisory team has put together, we believe that that this gives us some of that growth capacity to proceed forward. So we also, as part of the master planning, I think it's really important to understand that we're still trying to look at your facilities and these improvements, and we're still way up, sort of 20,000 feet and climbing and looking down at your facilities. We're not at the point where we're talking about designing learning communities or thinking about exactly how these things are going to come together. What we really need to do as part of the master planning process is to make sure that we have budgets to support that. And so we're trying to make sure that any of the improvements that we're recommending, we want to make sure that they're possible, right? We're not necessarily today designing the exact solution, because that's really going to be the role of your architects and engineers and civil engineers as they go through the stages of design, which will come after you guys potentially look to pass your local issue. And so ultimately, until the funding is in place, we'll start that design process, and then we can get into more specifics. And understand that the typical design for these types of improvements takes on the order of about 12 months. And so there's going to be a series of meetings that are going to take place at different phases. And we're going to engage all of the departments that will be impacted and all the grades that will be impacted in any of these improvements. But today, what we're trying to make sure of is to look at these and say, can we do this? Can this really be done? And so the high school was probably the most challenging of the improvements to consider. Because we are talking about bringing the 6-8 to that facility and to that campus, and we recognize that campus has its challenges as far as its traffic and circulation. And so we have developed a strategy that we believe is a good starting point. And I don't want to say that it's more than that. It is a starting point from a design standpoint for our team to be able to take forward. But we did analyze the existing circulation. And did try to appreciate what it looks like at pickup and drop-off times, and to understand what improvements might be necessary from a traffic standpoint in order for us to consider this bringing the 6-8 and also putting this addition onto the high school. The other piece to this is also thinking about the high school in its future, and the fact that there is a desire in the community, obviously, to think about some performing arts improvements, and to think about some additional athletic improvements, and to make sure that we have space to be able to consider those improvements. And so, as you see the diagram, right now what we have is again, keeping the north and the south entrances as they're established, but ultimately putting together a series of parking lots and drop-off areas that we believe will be able to support the facility in the future. And so as we've looked at it so far, what our belief is that the best place for the new 6-8 building addition to be located is in that northwest corner. So you can see that in red here. And then we talked about the fact that there's the need for some classroom space addition for the high school. And we would take that addition space off of the existing classroom wings, so it would tie in. And our goal with all of this would be that the high school addition piece is going to feel like it's always been there, right? When I'm walking in the corridor down the high school and I walk into this new addition piece, it's going to feel like that's always been there. And our goal to be to make sure that the 6-8 building and the high school as constructed can have separate identities, right? So we're talking about the 6-8 building having its own front door and having its own student dining space and having its own athletic space. So it can function as its own building on the same campus as the high school. And so the high school front door is not going to change. Visitors that are coming to the building are still going to walk in the front entryway there. The admin suite is still going to function the way that it functions today. But the 6-8 building is going to be to the rear of the site, and it's going to have its own identity, and the 6-8 students are going to be contained within that space, if you will. There will be connection between the two. We do anticipate that at a minimum, there's staff that are moving back and forth between these two facilities. So we want there to be the ability for folks to be able to move through. But ultimately, as these facilities are conceived on day one, they are going to have separate identities. You can see the different parking expansions that we're recommending in the bus drop-off, reconfiguration of the bus drop-off. We are engaging some athletic fields, some existing athletic fields. And so right now, where this bus drop-off area has expanded to and this parking expansion, they're currently in the location where the existing tennis courts and this practice field sit. And so we do want to plan for the relocation of the tennis courts and the possibility for where that practice field could be made up in the future. So we are thinking about all these things. And again, I don't want to tell anybody today that we've solved all of these issues, because we haven't. We need to go through that design process to be able to anticipate and think about in depth and working with all your teams about the future of this campus. But we have a plan in place that we believe can be successful. And we have engaged civil engineers and traffic engineers at a very high level to say, hey, can this work? And the response back from them is that it can work, and that there is going to be considerations that are going to have to be made and future design that's going to have to happen in order to make it successful. And so that's the 612, what will become the new 612 campus site plan. And so there's, we believe that we've got a plan in place that accommodates that and shows us a way forward there. And then as we look at the junior high site, obviously with the 7-8 moving off of this site now becomes that opportunity for preschool and for district office, and then for support space. And so, there's still groups in the community that use these fields. And so we want to make sure that that we can maintain these fields and make sure that they're a safe environment, not only for those groups, but also for any of the, potential overflow that we have from any other athletics that need to kind of push down this way. There's a day where the existing sanitary wastewater treatment plant comes offline when we have public utilities. And so we believe that there's that opportunity to sort of expand the future play fields in the front yard. I know that they're currently using that as some overflow space for some of the youth athletics. There's an opportunity to do a little bit more with that. We also obviously have looked at the existing what was the old junior high stadium, and it ultimately has run its useful life, if you will. I think the grandstands and the light poles out there are probably time for those to come down, and so we've included some dollars to allow for reconditioning that field and ultimately taking some of those amenities that are out there down, so that this can become more of just a practice field, if you will, in the future. Keeping baseball and softball for the time being, and ultimately reconditioning the existing practice field to the furthest to the west. And so that will allow the junior high to continue as a site that we can use to support athletics, to support district office, to support preschool, and to still stay as the possibility for expansion should the district continue to grow out past the boundaries that we've discussed as far as those 15 or 20-year windows. There is a slide in for cost. I'm not going to go into great detail on these other than to just talk a little bit about the fact that, we've identified not only the improvement cost, but we've also baked in some required what we're calling LFIs. It's a local funded initiative. It's dollars that are there to protect the district and moving forward. And so we have some inflation protection in place. We have protection to allow the district to consider doing some materials and systems upgrades that would be over and above what the Ohio Facility Construction Commission would typically call their good level. Renovating the junior high and the district for the district office and preschool, we have some money in there for that. And then obviously for the stadium work. And then those educational interventions that I mentioned at Monroe, at Plain City, and at Canaan, of going into those classroom areas and being able to provide some future flexibility for small group instruction and for extended learning areas. We have some dollars in for those as well. And then I think the last slide again breaks down the project cost, gives an explanation of the millage, and then what that cost is per $100,000 home value. And then there's some assumptions obviously there for what that is. And then lastly, I mentioned to you that we're going to be entering into the Expedited Local Partnership Program. That program allows you to bank credit with OFCC. And so our anticipation is off of this project cost that you will bank a minimum of about $14.5 million, which then will be money that the commission, when they bring their offer of funding, will bring back to the school district and allow you to consider for future improvements. So that, again, allows you some future flexibility for when the commission comes back to you. Last slide. All of this information, all the way through the planning process, again, we have talked about keeping this as an open and transparent process, and I hope hopefully you and the community feel that we've done that. Every one of our presentations, every presentation that we've given to a community advisory team, or to just to the community at large, or a board presentation. All of those presentations have been placed on the elevatealder.com website, and all of our information sits there. And so I encourage everybody, I kind of went through a lot of this information very quickly, but the educational visioning, was such an important component. And I encourage you to go back and take a look at the results of that educational visioning, which is laid out in multiple presentations to the educational visioning team. So I encourage you to go there and take a look at those, because I do think they're very impactful and really did help inform us. And so with that, I think that's our last slide. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to stop the recording now. I appreciate everybody allowing me to kind of get through the presentation.